As a reminder, most of these are straight districts. I will mention they are not straight zoning districts. Otherwise noted, they are straight zoning districts, which again, we are not planning on rezoning property to these districts as part of this, but these will be options for property owners to rezone to. So starting off with the corridor, it's a general commercial zone. The language is a wide variety of commercial uses in support of computational and institutional uses, among others across existing and planned corridors. So it's a pretty wide range of commercial uses, can accommodate both the auto-oriented development and provide flexibility for pedestrian-oriented development. Campus institutional or CI, and bear with me, we'll look at this down the line. It can be confusing with some of these abbreviations because we have both a CI and a CL, so those can easily get confused, but there is a distinction between CI and CL. So CI is the campus institutional zone. Provides standards for site flexibility, connectivity, green space, and public spaces, some sort of institutional and campus type developments. I do want to have more discussion on this one later. We'll circle back around to this, but the goal for this zone was really for kind of public and semi-public uses. So things like government buildings would fit nicely into this zone. Utilities, churches, schools, things of those, again, public or semi-public use was really the goal of drafting this.
So where do like hospitals or assisted senior living, is that considered institutional, or is that considered?
So I believe those could fall into either.
Okay.
Again, we'll circle back around because I do want to hone in on that campus institutional zone to get some feedback.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Community living zone is the CL, so that's basically the multifamily zone. It would be multifamily straight district as opposed to our current multifamily planned residential district. The flex employment zone, the FE, that's really our equivalent to an industrial district. It's not heavy industry, it's not mining or kind of combination of raw materials, but light industrial, research and development, tech, office. Does allow generally for commercial uses as well, but it's really kind of geared towards that Green Meadows corridor in particular, along the east side of 23 there. Lewis Center Village District is specifically geared towards that old Village of Lewis Center area. We had some good discussion on this when we did our work sessions earlier in the year that the Commission's general feedback was to try to make this geographically targeted because we didn't want somebody on the other opposite end of the township trying to rezone to Lewis Center Village. So we kicked around some different ideas to try to make that work. And what we ended up landing on in this draft was to use it as an overlay district, which is good for a number of reasons. One is that it does allow us to limit it geographically, and so it's a very defined, and there is a map in the zoning resolution itself, which specifically says these parcels can use this overlay, and no other parcels can do that. So it does target it geographically. It also allows for a bit of an expedited process because the goal of this district was to provide the Lewis Center Village homeowners and residents and business owners with some flexibility, because currently it's all zoned FR1. If they want to do anything, then they need a slew of variances. So this was to give them some more flexibility with their properties. So instead of them having to go through a variance process or a full rezoning, we thought kind of a happy medium was to have it as an overlay district where they can do things a little more expediently, pull down that cloud zoning for whatever their project may be. And I'll get into that a little bit more later, but it would allow them to be heard by this commission, by the zoning commission, and have just kind of a one-stop approval there.
Are there any standards for Lewis Center with respect to setbacks and?
Yes, so that would all be included in the overlay district text. And
Okay.
I'll talk more about that once we get.
That's fine. I mean, as long as there's standards, then it makes sense for an overlay that here's what's going to come next, and you still have to abide by these standards that were already set. That's fine.
Mixed use district, again, pretty self-explanatory. It is a mix of commercial and residential uses. It's designed to be pretty flexible. Obviously, the commercial uses that are permitted in the mixed use tend to be more of the neighborhood commercial. We're not, proposing things like fuel centers and things like that in that mixed use.
So does this mean something like Evans Farm would be nowadays under a mixed use district, or would that still require creative zoning like we had to do in the past?
The goal is that if a project like that came along, they could probably use the mixed use district. If they felt like that didn't work for whatever reason, then they could do it as a land unit development.
Okay.
But in theory, we're trying to craft this mixed use district so that it would encompass, hopefully what somebody would want out of a mixed use development.
Okay.
Neighborhood zone is our basic single family district. Again, it would, we had kind of envisioned this as rezoning all existing neighborhoods to the neighborhood zone. So we tried to craft those standards appropriately. Now that we're not looking at rezoning everybody's house in Orange Township, the neighborhood zone, again, it's more setting things up for the future, so that future residential developments could rezone to the neighborhood zone and do a straight district zoning instead of the land development. You have a question, Darth?
Yeah, what I want to say, I think I asked you this one last time also, was I don't see any industrial district on this.
We have light.
Light industrial.
We have.
Yeah, we do not have a provision for, let's say, 15, 20 years down the lane, when we have a particular, it's heavy industrial, but it doesn't really pollute anything. Let's say, would we consider that as heavy industrial, but would not be permitted in our zoning because we don't even have a category like that?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, that all uses would have to be permitted in some fashion, whether that's a conditional use or, so if there was a heavy industrial use, that would have to be able to fit with parameters in one of these districts. Does that answer your question? Is that fair?
And I think, so just because you don't have a separate heavy industrial section, I think you folks on your permitted or on your use chart, do you have more heavy industrial? There aren't.
No.
Generally not.
So that's why I was curious.
So, yeah.
I had a question about that anyway when we get to that.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll revisit this when we get to the use table. So heavy industrial we do have as a just kind of encompassing category, and it would be conditionally permitted in the flex employment zone. So it's not outright permitted, but it's conditionally permitted. And again, if they don't feel that the flex employment zone is right for that type of development, they could also do it as a planning district. So that's kind of meant to be that release valve. If something, we're trying to craft all these categories so that it catches just about everything, but just in case it doesn't, they can do a PUD to catch whatever else.
So there is a mechanism to get to it, to have an industrial project, but obviously no guarantee. It has to,
So it falls back on the PUD.
Or it's a conditional in what is sort of our light industrial district. So, which,
No, I've seen it.
to be honest, I'm happy with, because depending upon the amount of noise or noise pollution, emissions, whatever, I think it should be considered on sort of like a conditional use basis, considering what it might be neighboring.
Just a reminder, you can move the microphones a little closer to you if possible.
Oh.
It's a little too far when you lean back like that. I don't, it doesn't capture the audio as well, so sorry. We're working on fixing that.
It's okay.
Okay.
All right, so moving on, so next is the plan unit development. So again, we'll dive into this a little bit more later, but it's to provide that flexibility for unique projects, promote the goals of the comp plan, but cannot be accomplished under a base zoning district. So again, it's meant to be that catch-all that hopefully when we're creating these straight districts, most developments can choose from that menu of options, but if there's something that unique or a unique property or something that warrants a planned unit development, a specific development plan for a specific parcel, then they have that option under the PUD section. Again, and we'll dive into this more later, but it's one planned unit district instead of how we have it separated out now, where we have single family planned residential districts, multi-family planned residential districts, planned industrial, planned commercial. So all those subcategories will go away and just be one. And then lastly is the farm residential, which is FR1, which formerly we had in this draft, it was rural residential. So because it's a straight zone that exists within the township currently, we're not going to go through the process of changing the name, but essentially the properties that are FR1 now would stay FR1. It's the same general zoning district, but we are looking at changing some of those development standards. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. So without getting into the meat of each of these districts, that is Article 4. Does anyone have any general questions about how the districts are set up or anything we want to talk about in Article 4?
All right, I think the commission is good if we want to move on to Article 5.
Yeah.
Let's move to Article 5. So a lot of what's in Article 5 is that use table that goes through each zoning district that we just discussed. And then we have the list of uses. As a reminder, if the filled-in circle is in that zoning district, then it's a permitted use. If it's a hollow circle, then it's a conditional use. And then if it's blank in that section, then it would not be permitted at all. Julie, just so I'm not talking the whole time, can you give a very quick overview of what conditional use is and how that works?
Sure, absolutely. So, and it's good to see everyone again. So in terms of conditional uses, so obviously in a district, you've got a list of permitted uses, and those are things that the zoning commission and the trustees basically have identified as, you know what, this type of use works in this district regardless of any other factors. A conditional use, and there's usually a list of conditional uses, those are uses that you folks will identify as specific uses that you could envision working in that district, but maybe not in every situation. And so if someone comes in and wants to operate something as a conditional use, they have to go before your Board of Zoning Appeals and basically present what they're going to do, what their conditional use is going to be, how they're going to operate, and the BZA then makes a judgment call of whether or not they think the proposal is appropriate for that district. The example that I like to give, it's common for a residential straight district to have as a conditional use, you know, they might have a school, they might have a, you know, maybe a grocery store or that type of thing. But you could imagine a situation where you know, maybe an elementary school would work for a particular district, but maybe not the Ohio State University would work for a particular district. So it's a situation where, yeah, there could be, these uses might work, but we don't want to say any school or particular use that falls in that category automatically has a green light. We just want to make sure they go through an extra layer of review. We just talked about industrial uses. Obviously, that's something that you need to find somewhere for heavy industrial uses to fit in your zoning resolution. As Robin said, industrial uses have been identified as a conditional use in specific districts, so that way it gives the township an extra layer of review for a specific project.
So, quick question. Can you give me what is the exact definition of small solar facility?
Yeah, so, and we can. So this is one where we have added definitions. So in theory, every use that you're seeing in that chart has a definition.
So that's what I was going to recommend, so it's clear.
Yeah.
So there's a few of these sections that we are still working to refine. Solar is one of them because this is essentially new. We don't have any solar regulations currently.
I would include wind as well.
Sorry.
Wind arrays
Yeah,
seem to
yeah,
be
that
popular in
was-
certain areas of Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So small solar facility, we do have a definition for, which is one of the ones that we kind of looked at addressing. It's tightened up a little bit, but a small solar facility, a solar energy system with a single interconnection to the electrical grid, designed for operation aggregate capacity of less than 50 megawatts.
Okay, so if I have my house or my business and I want to install solar panels on top of my carport, or my business, I want to install solar panels on the roof for, is that considered a small solar facility, or is that something that I can add to my business to power my parking lot lights or something?
So, and this is where we need to clean up our definitions. The goal is, so we have a separate category for integrated solar energy systems, which is kind of that building, a building that incorporates solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is make sure that it doesn't overlap with that small solar facility definition.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is something where you have a solar facility that is predominantly for use on site, as opposed to a solar facility that is producing energy for large-scale neighborhood or production use, versus I have a small facility on site to power my business, and then if there's excess, it may or may not go back into the grid.
I mean, there's no reason why not to put back into the grid. There is net metering in Ohio.
Yeah, it'd be great. I know there's some complications with AEP and other groups, but yeah. Bureaucracy aside, yes, it would be ideal. Can we have the public speak? Or should we have a spot at the... Feel free. Name.
Mark Freeman, 478 Glenside Lane. I'm wondering about the difference between rooftop solar and integrated solar.
So rooftop would fall into the definition of integrated solar system. So the full definition, a solar energy system that is incorporated into or replaces standard building materials and does not have mounting equipment. For example, these systems may include materials that replace traditional roofing, shingle or siding materials, awnings, canopies, skylights, or windows. I think there's some tweaking of that definition that is in order, because oftentimes it's the solar panels on top of the roof.
Well, I was going to say they
replacing
are.
The roof
Yeah, there
materials.
can be panels on top of the roof, which would be roof mounted, as opposed to panels that are integrated into shingle systems or canopy systems or into your roofing material.
But I think the goal is for us to tighten up those definitions, so that actually possibly, although I think you know, and we'll get the commission's feedback on this. We just want to make sure there's a distinction between, you know, a small solar farm that has 20 megawatts and somebody's rooftop solar farm.
Yeah, I mean, also, for example, there's a house on 315, just north of the Hills Market, where they've got solar panels mounted on the ground because the roof is oriented the wrong way. But it's a very small number, and it's a pretty small square footage of panels. And so when you start talking about ground mounted versus integrated, you know, it would be nice if we could provide a definition for something, you know, for use instead of having, you know, 3 or 4 different ones. If there's a way to do that.
Yeah, so actually this was one of the things that Julie and I were discussing last week, that we may look at a certain allowance for a threshold of number of square feet or number of panels.
And the other thing that I think would be helpful is just like you have sort of like beverage, you know, distribution, beverage brewing, if you could do like the same thing, solar, integrated solar rooftop, so it's all grouped together. And right now, if it could be like alphabetical or something, would be helpful, because right now it's sort of.
Yeah, understood.
And that way we could look up all solar and see what all the definitions are, sort of, and all the subcategories in one chunk, as opposed to having to flip through pages of tables.
Yes.
Would the solar panels be a new permitting process for us?
Yes.
Because we don't do any permitting for it right now.
HOA is responsible for that right now, right? So I know this industry really well because I have tracked companies in this space. I would, given how new the industry is, I would say conditional approval for majority of use cases, because I can imagine when you're a mixed-use district like Evans Farms would say a bunch of their residential users would say, we want to use this plot of land for ground mounted and offset our energy costs. So it's possible. So I would strongly recommend that, you know, conditional use for majority of use cases.
What we've discussed, and in terms of the roof mounted and the integrated, in terms of the, you know, that lends itself more towards the individual use, but on the ground mounted side, you could imagine a situation where someone might, I mean, it's lot coverage, and someone might want to put all, you know, no grass, just all ground mounted solar panels, and so our thought has been, or at least it's what our discussion's been, okay, in terms of, you know, ground mounted at some point probably should be a conditional use, so you need to come in and you need to get some extra approval if that's what you want to do. And then we've kind of created a catch-all of, other than these smaller things, you know, if you want these larger, but still a small solar facility, you need to come in and apply for a conditional use permit.
Yeah. AEP has really, or Senate has really clarified that, Ohio Senate, anything less than 50 megawatts can go almost anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and Julie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so we do not really have authority to regulate above 50 megawatts.
Exactly.
Correct. You're exactly right, that above 50, nobody's in this room dealing with that. This only relates to regulation of small facilities under 50, and that can go anywhere from, again, the solar panels on your house to, you know, 50, just under 50 megawatt facility is still a pretty big, or could be a very big facility.
Each megawatt requires about 5 to 7 acres, so.
Wow, is it really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's not that simple.
And so and if I'm way off base here, then please give me some direction on this, but I think my general thinking is, you know, if somebody is looking to use solar for their personal property, for instance, for one property, I think generally that should either be permitted or maybe a conditional use with some guidelines there. But if it's, you know, if it's something that's going to power multiple properties that it's, more of a true solar farm, then that's where it should get into more rigorous.
Here is my question, probably for Julie, I think, legal counsel. Would the HOA ownership across the neighborhoods see as this taking away power from them and permitting it at the zoning code rather than, right now, HOAs do that, don't they? Would they see it that way, or can you give us some sense of what would be the repercussion if the HOA says, you're taking away power from us to home rule?
So it's unique in going through this process and having these discussions with Robin. There've been multiple things where I've asked the question of, well, other townships do X, Y, and Z. It's like, we don't do that. The HOAs, your HOAs must deal with the lot, quite frankly, just because of what's in your zoning resolution hasn't been. So what I will say is your property owners will have to be in conformance with both. So they will have to be in compliance with the zoning resolution and their HOA deed restrictions. And so if someone comes to the township and asks for not just solar panels, but if it's a fence, if it's deck or anything, and that's always been the case. But I think in this situation, folks are probably going to have to start coming to the township if they need to get a permit for their solar panels. They're going to have to make sure that they're in compliance with both.
It would seem that the developer walking in with a particular development would have to say, we really want to be able to use solar panels, so then it gets included in the HOA. Because if you left it the HOA to their own situation, which we've done, which is fine, they have all the power, then they could decide, no, we want none of it. Wouldn't that have to be the case from the developer point of view and have it written in from the start?
So keeping on the solar panel discussion, I think it might have been a year and a half, it might have been close to 2 years ago. Ohio changed the laws with respect to HOAs and condominiums and their abilities to regulate solar panels. Mm-hmm. And so this conversation is a little different than any other conversation we may have with an HOA or a condo association. But now the law says that unless there's something specifically in your deed restriction that prevents a solar panel from going in, they have to approve it. They can't prevent you from putting up a solar panel.
But if the HOA wrote it in from the start, then they can do it.
Yep.
They can add it also.
They could add it, but they could also restrict it. They still have all the power. At the end of the day, the HOA still has all the power.
Well, if the deed restriction doesn't give them the power, then if the deed restriction is silent, then the owner can put up a solar panel.
Yeah, but so then they would have to amend the HOA, which would require all the owners getting together and agreeing to vote on something and having whatever the bylaws say the majority needs to pass to change the HOA regulations.
Well, the good news is we haven't bumped into that too much because we've left it up to whatever your HOA decisions are, and we have stayed out of it.
That is where I think we are going to run into.
Yeah, and I also think that's kind of a better position, but if we can't, then it needs to be written up properly.
Well, and what I will say is, if the township does not want to address the personal, kind of what I'll call the personal use solar panels, you don't have to in your zoning resolution. This is just one way of doing it, but obviously if it's silent, then that means that, there's an argument that you have not restricted those things, which you haven't in the past, and it hasn't been a problem, but while you're asking the question of, should we make changes, what possible issues could arise, what possible complaints, then that's why.
I could see there being issues with ground-mounted solar panels.
Oh, absolutely, because
neighbors.
absolutely, if you decide to take up your entire yard with solar panels.
And there'll be water runoff issues.
And again, I'm not sure if the HOAs have thought of this stuff yet.
So if rooftop solar panels for, I guess, residential is not in the code, then it's just not enforced.
Correct, yeah, just how we handle it now.
Yeah.
And so my goal, just from an administrative standpoint, would be, I don't want to issue permits for roof mounted solar, right? We don't have any standard view there. So I don't want to get into that business, but again, that's just we want to make sure our definitions are clear and separate, so that roof mounted and other integrated solar systems can be separated out from the ground mounted, which I agree is where things could get a little funny.
It is a fun issue, for sure. And coming to the next one, I know solar associated with the battery, that is a bigger issue because it has safety concerns. Batteries do have safety concerns because you can, so how are we dealing with that?
So we really don't through zoning. When my understanding is when solar panels are installed, they do require building permits. And so that's when that level of electric review comes into play. But that's not really something that, I mean, I'm not qualified to review somebody's electrical system and batteries. And that is something that I believe should be the jurisdiction of the building department.
Building and Safety Department. So that's what they're called.
One thing I've read about is the concept of community solar facilities. Hypothetically, you get a developer that wants to put in 100 houses, and they set aside a lot, say 5 to 7 acres, of solar panels, which are considered an amenity to the community, because everybody gets a share of the solar energy that is generated right there in the neighborhood before they have to go to AEP or whoever. So some means of making it so that we don't outright prevent something like that would be lovely. Certainly that would want to be a conditional use. We'd want to have a lot of oversight as to how big is it, what are they doing with interconnection.
The technology has to change. The solar panels aren't nearly efficient enough to operate in a city that has 340 days a year with clouds. I don't think we have that to fear here in Ohio with a solar panel.
Yes, but by the same token, I know.
It could be future, but
I know
they aren't nearly
communities-
efficient enough to be
And
functional.
like Michigan, that do have solar, they're intentional communities or collective communities, and they have community shared space, and as part of that community shared space is community gardens and community solar to offset everyone's cost. So, yeah, we might not be there yet, but people are making inroads. And I would like to encourage them to make these inroads, but I still agree that when it comes to ground mounted, it should be conditional, just to make sure that neighboring property owners will not be negatively impacted.
Yes, too much green space.
Well, have you heard about agrivoltaics?
What?
You can, so they build it 7 feet high, and then you can do agriculture underneath. I've seen a big solar farm northeast of Ohio, where this is done, 800 acres. They actually raise sugar beets underneath the solar panels.
I mean, luckily we don't have that much acreage to work with.
But I'm saying, it's possible.
Yeah.
Technology is evolving so fast. I would rather add a catch on other solar category also.
Or alternative energy.
Catch-all, yeah.
Alternative energy.
Other alternative energy, all the conditional approval.
So to just kind of recap our discussion here, so just so I have my clear takeaways and marching orders, so I think we're generally on board with integrated roof mounted solar being permitted just about everywhere. but the ground mounted solar farms would be require more rigorous review, through conditional use and or development statements.
And that would be available in pretty much any zoning category, conditional use.
Understood. Yeah, so and you can see on that first one there, so this was, again, just the first stab at it, so I had it permitted, in the flex employment zone, so in industrial, and then conditionally, permitted in farm residential, commercial corridor, and campus institution.
Oh, a small solar, yeah.
So didn't you just say you wanted it conditional?
Yeah.
Yeah, across all of them?
Yes.
Yes. We're gonna talk about it, yeah.
And so that, and going down 2 lines, so that was, if you look at the integrated solar energy system, so that was really the goal for roof mounted and other such solar systems. Again, I had that permitted in every district. So I believe we're on the right track there. Again, we'll tighten up those definitions, make sure that it is generally conditional, the ground mounted is more conditional, and we'll revise those for the next round.
So, a small solar facility would be conditional for a neighborhood zone. It's that community solar facility we're talking about.
I believe that was the direction that the commission was.
Anything else on this page?
I'll just briefly point out, so the home-based business is kind of meant to be that very small scale home-based business that, somebody's running a business out of their home, but it doesn't necessarily, they don't have customers coming there, they're not manufacturing things. We do outline that a little more rigorously in a later section in the same article. But essentially, as our home, traditionally when we have home-based businesses, we refer to them as home occupations. As our code is currently set up and how Euclidean zoning traditionally has been over the last 50 years or so, you have to get a conditional use for just about any home-based business. This would kind of separate out major and minor home-based businesses, so that if you're just doing office work, if you're just running an accounting business out of your house, then you may not necessarily have to get a conditional use from the Board of Zoning Appeals. But we outlined that to kind of distinguish those major and minor. Major home occupations would still have to go before the boards.
Would a luxury car rental business run out of your home consider?
I think if they were just doing office work, then yeah. But if they were storing vehicles on the property and having clients come and pick up vehicles, things like that, then that would trigger the major.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a conditional approval.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just to clarify, if you're a CPA and you're doing taxes at your house, you may have 3, 4, 5, 6 clients coming to your house on a daily basis. They're not storing vehicles there, they're just parking in the driveway while they're having their appointments. So, lawyers, various other types of people are running those kind of businesses where it's not a transfer of product or inventory, but there's still people coming to the house. As opposed to some people that are running, Shackley, Amway, Cambridge, whatever facility where they've got a garage full of inventory and they're constantly selling out of that way. It's not like a retail establishment, but there's still car traffic.
Yes. Do we want to get into this now? We'll be jumping around a little bit, but it's covered in section 5.06.
Yeah, I would prefer to wait till we get to section 05.06, because I actually have questions about that, but I don't know how the other commission members feel. Okay, we'll punt.
Yeah, so we'll dig into the details of that in a little bit, but just wanted to mention it as something on this page. All right, anything else on this page of the use table before we jump to the next one?
I just, the only comment I had on this page is if we wanted, I don't know, for a private garage, if we wanted to make that a conditional use for farm residential.
I have concerns about that.
Okay.
I'm
just thinking if they would have
Correct me if I'm wrong, but agricultural use, it's been very difficult to prove that that private garage is not for agricultural use. And I guess that's my concern, is because I thought that with farm residential or agricultural use, you have a very broad leeway on what you can do with your property, what you can do with agricultural buildings and things of that nature, unless that's changed here in Ohio.
Yeah, so, and just to, we'll do this, I think, multiple times throughout this use table, but I will go to the definition of private garage, which is a detached accessory building, or portion of the principal building used for the storage of four or fewer automobiles or trailers by the owners or tenants of the lot, or by persons other than the owners or tenants of the lot by lease agreement with the owners or tenants of the lot. So really, I think private garage should probably be permitted everywhere under that definition.
Yes.
So what we may want to do is separate out when it is for use. Legal can correct me if this is possible, but if we can separate out when it's for use by the property owner and when it's for use by somebody.
Okay, so to really just clarifying the definition, because that was my thought. I was like, I mean, if a residential lot wants to have a detached garage for extra vehicles, that's kind of what.
Okay. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, because currently we have the private garage is not permitted in FL1. I'm fairly confident that people in FL1 have garages on that.
Yeah, and that may or may not be for personal and or agricultural use. But
yeah, I do think that agricultural exemption would kind of be another discussion entirely.
Okay. But I do agree with you that if it's a private garage that is not for personal use, but for leasing parking spaces, that should be reviewed.
So one thought that I have is for private garages that are more for personal use. That's usually an accessory use, not necessarily in a residential district. And so that's one thing that I don't think that the township wants to accidentally walk into identifying as it a permitted use, that it would be a permitted accessory use, so long as it's incidental to or secondary to single family home.
So if it's an accessory use, I don't think we did not list accessory uses in here. So just, you know, if private garage is going to be permitted throughout, then, and we think, when we all think it's more for the own personal use, then that should be striked out and just considered an accessory use. Okay.
Yeah, because you get people with 2 or 3 car garages that will rent out everything to somebody who just needs a place to store a car. You see these listings on Nextdoor, Facebook, and whatnot. People just looking for a place to stash a car.
Right.
So, how much paperwork and meetings do they have to do that when it's primarily just their residential garage and they're just renting out a space?
Well, I'm thinking of like multifamily units where, let's say you have a row of townhouses or a row of condos and you have garages, and that sometimes with the lease of an apartment or with a condo, you might get a specific garage. Or you might just have to lease it separately, that it's not part. And then that opens like a whole, for me, can of worms of is it personal use or is it leased? And whether or not that should be regulated as opposed to anybody can lease out a garage.
Yeah, I mean, if when you rent out a condo, and you get a space or two spaces in a shared garage setup, I don't think that we should treat that any differently, whether it's included in your lease for the condo, or whether you're going to pay a fee per garage slot. As long as you're a resident there.
So I've known in other jurisdictions, I don't know, we aren't here yet in Orange Township, hopefully, where you might have an apartment complex or a townhouse complex or whatever, and they will lease out vacant garage spaces or available garage spaces to somebody else, like in the short north, to use for, business purposes, to use for, I don't live there, but I work down there, so I'm going to lease a spot.
But see, that happens more in the bigger cities.
Exactly. We're not there
We're
yet.
nowhere there at all.
We're not there yet, but I have, that would be one thing where I would have concerns, because I would feel that as a resident, I would want to have some control over leased spots in my residence.
I'd like to think that would be some form of a zoning violation if they are treating a residential garage for commercial use. So, if we heard something like that could happen, we could pursue action. So,
I mean, I can imagine that happening in the future with the events farms, right next to them, building a big sports complex.
Yeah.
You have a very popular game, and you have like 1,000 cars coming. They won't park anywhere. They would love, and the residents would love to sell their garage space for that day to make a quick buck.
I have no problem with, I know people who do that for parades or whatever.
Exactly.
Like Muirfield.
Exactly.
But,
exactly. Yeah, that Muirfield's actually a good example of where people lease out house or garage space or whatever.
Yeah, I think we'll look at these definitions and kind of compare them to the use tables, and I think we'll make some revisions here. Just noting that private garage is specifically for 4 or fewer automobiles, and then public parking garage is 5 or more vehicles. Because I think the goal of this was to restrict where big parking garages could locate, so that somebody doesn't build a gigantic parking garage, in Walker Woods, just as an extreme example. But to try to prevent that, not necessarily to get into the micromanaging of
What people are doing with their property.
So it does, thank you for pointing that out, that does warrant scrutiny. So let us look into that and we'll make some revisions. I think both the definitions and the use tables based on those definitions need a little attention.
next page? Or
Let's do it.
do it? All right.
Let's do it.
All right, so again, there's the heavy industrial is conditionally permitted in flex employment. Light industrial is permitted both in commercial corridor and flex employment. Warehousing and logistics, again, slightly more intense use permitted in flex employment, conditionally permitted in commercial corridor.
So I do have a question.
Sure.
So like adult entertainment business, I know we have to provide for that.
Yes.
So we have to have a conditional use for select locations, not with near like a school or daycare or anything like that, or a church, residence, what have you. With marijuana facility, do we also have to provide for that, or can we totally exclude it like we have right now?
So there's new updates from that. So the trustees did pass a resolution to, and Jolie, please tell me if I'm wrong, to permit a marijuana dispensary. Yeah, dispensary. So the sale of marijuana at a maximum of 2 in the township, and then how that is defined is considered commercial retail.
Okay.
So I believe the reason why it's blank here is because we already have 2 permits in place. We're assuming we're not going to be having any more. So that's.
So we can look at these definitions also, just to make sure maybe the title should change, because I think there could be some confusion down the line. So marijuana facility, as defined by the trustees in their resolution, was the processing and growing facilities.
Okay.
So a retail dispensary would not fall under this definition of marijuana facility. And so the trustees' resolution explicitly prohibited the growing and cultivation.
And we can do that legally? Okay.
So
that's why I'm asking you.
The thought was to kind of echo that or codify it in the zoning resolution as well.
Is that we're only, just walked out, we're only having this retail sales, the distribution, okay.
Yes.
And plus the cultivation places take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take up a lot of
They would
space.
take up a lot of space, and not that I am advocating that we should have one of those facilities in our township. I just want to make sure that we are not legally required to have one.
We are permitting 2.
Okay.
So I have a quick question on that specifically. Going back to previous page, agriculture is permitted everywhere, and in farm residential, a family can grow up to 12 plants as per state law.
Well,
Right.
each adult 6 plants, so if you have
But
2
family-
But as long as you're not selling it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then
Yeah, that's not a
Outside.
regulation. Yeah.
farm residential outside in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Correct.
The township zoning resolution does not impede, whatever you're permitted to grow in your backyard, the township zoning resolution doesn't prohibit that, and I don't think that the township would be able to
Regulate
To
that.
enforce anything.
You don't want to go there.
Yeah, so if
We're
your
not just gonna
neighbor,
go out there and start cutting.
so if your neighbor decides to start growing their 12 plants in their backyard, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
I don't want 6 per adult. Then a family could be a family of 1. I mean, that's the definition of a family in the homeless shelter, so it doesn't have to be 2 adults in the household.
Another question on this slide is the beverage brewing. So there are folks who home brew beer in their garages.
That would be a home base.
That would not be counted.
It's a good question.
I do think the definitions related to, all of the beverage definitions relate to a commercial activity.
Okay.
So not just again, I've got a hobby in my garage, there's a commercial component.
Yes, you're correct, Julie. So production of, establishment where beer, malt beverages, or spirits are made on the premises and then sold or distributed either by wholesale or retail. So this would not, somebody home brewing for their own personal use would not fall under this. But thank you, that's a good question.
Is calling a bunch of friends and drinking together considered distribution?
As long as you're not selling it.
As long as the sheriff department doesn't show up. And we have a definition of the beverage distribution, because I'm assuming that's like wholesale distribution as opposed to retail distribution, which would be beverage sales.
That makes sense to me.
I don't know that we do have that definition. So
All right.
we'll look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think once we'll cross-check all these uses here to make sure there are definitions for
And then it's
them.
clear what you mean by, like I said. I assume distribution wholesale versus like retail, which would be the sales.
Mhm.
Yeah, truthfully, I don't even, we could look at rolling that into a logistics definition.
Well, I was just thinking there's, behind the Walmart, there's some beverage distribution of beer or something like that. I forget which branch it is, but which for me,
Superior beverage.
thank you. Thank you. I'm assuming that's what beverage distribution is for.
Yes.
Okay.
But you are correct, I don't think we have a separate definition for beverage distribution, so we will look at that.
One final question, why is an art studio not allowed on a farm residential?
Why is not, I'm sorry?
Art studio,
Oh, art
not
studio.
allowed?
I could see it being conditional, I mean, farm residential is supposed to be a residential zone, more or less.
Conditional, just like a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Conditional.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it could be conditional.
Yeah, I'd almost say antique shop might be conditional for farm residential as well,
Works for me.
because they have a lot of, some places have farms with stuff up, like Garth's auction house, or what used to be Garth's,
Yep, makes sense.
would, for me, but make it conditional, so that if someone wants to open up a antique store, whatever, out of their barn.
Makes sense.
All right. Oh,
And what about the farm stand, where somebody's got the farmland and they want to have a roadside stand just on a corner or whatever, so we classify.
That's going to fall under, I'll let Julie cover this.
No, and that's a great question. So, in Ohio, ag is king, and there are very specific restrictions on what the township can restrict with respect to farm markets and that type of thing. And so, the language that we've included in the zoning resolution mirrors the statute. It restricts what you're able to restrict, which basically is.
And it also handles, I assume, what I want to call agribusiness, tourism,
Agritourism,
like
yes.
Leeds Farm, apple picking, pumpkin harvesting, corn mazes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the language is, again, basically out of the statute, and so, a lot of agricultural restrictions, you have to affirmatively put the restrictions in there, otherwise it is, it's kind of anything goes, so.
All right. Are there any other questions on this page, or can we move forward? Okay. Let's make it simple. Let's get through this table tonight.
Yeah, that would be great if you guys could do that. I think we can.
Yes, we do. Car wash is always a tricky topic, so that would be conditionally permitted as a commercial corridor, only permitted in flex employment zone.
For the new ones.
Yes. Yeah, again, any use that's existing currently is going to be permitted to remain as it is once this zoning resolution is passed.
And all these permitted uses are as if they're in these districts, and all the planned districts, which is the majority of the township, are not. So they would follow the standards within their own planned district. So again, yeah, future. This is all really for future. I mean, FR1 could maybe have the most immediate impact to this, because that's the only straight district that's could change. I think that's fair to say. But
Mostly yes, and I'll get.
okay. All right. Yeah. But yeah, all this doesn't impact the planned districts that have their own unique permitted and prohibited uses within them.
So I don't know how to have this discussion, because I know with drive-throughs and the whole Route 23 overlay, which we got rid of, there were like conditional use for drive-throughs and things like that. So right now we're allowing them anywhere that's commercial and conditional use and flex employment. So that basically means anything zoned commercial, including like parts of Evans Farm or something like that, could have a drive-through. Is that correct?
If they rezone to commercial.
Yeah,
Okay.
but since Evans has its own, yeah.
Okay.
And we'll get to this
Alright.
later in the document, but there are specific provisions and standards for
Drive-throughs.
drive-throughs,
Okay.
which we don't have currently.
All right, well then I feel better about it, because I do not want to see drive-throughs in every commercial area. So as long as there's regulations of like accessibility, you know, major traffic areas as opposed to subsidiary roads or stay there overnight. Now, I don't know if there's, you know, regulations on like how many or like indoors and not outdoors, but I'm just thinking, like I said, if I bring my animal to a vet and they need to be watched overnight, I'm assuming that means they have to have a kennel attached to them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So same, like permissions for both the vet clinic and the kennel.
Yeah, or you can have it at the vet clinic and just have it be conditional at the kennel. And the other thing, conditional for a kennel, I would probably put under farm residential as well, because I do know some people take their animals to like doggy daycare at the farm, which would be considered like a kennel.
So,
Is that correct? Or is that even not something you have to think about because of agricultural uses?
so what I was going to say on, you know, don't disagree in terms of mirroring the vet and kennel question. What I was going to say, there's more and more case law coming out about kennels, and believe it or not, they are considered agriculture. And the case law is being, so in terms of specifically permitting, absolutely, you know, that's something that you have the ability to do, but something that we will have to piece out is making sure that you haven't attempted to restrict in a situation where you don't have the ability to restrict under agriculture. One thing to keep in mind with, so there again, I think we're going to get more and more case law because everybody has doggy daycares and that sort of thing. So overnight care, that sort of thing, clearly agriculture, but there's cases in terms of extra services, you know, in terms of you know, grooming services, or there was believe it or not, there was a lawsuit about a crematorium for pets, and so things like that. Just wanted to at least mention that.
So if kennel is going to be considered agriculture, do we even need that as a use, and then it just falls into agriculture?
So I think,
or wait, is
the
it?
one caveat though, because if think that through.
Yeah, because I mean, I think we have to permit agriculture everywhere because they are.
The pet centers, I'm familiar with them, all the pets. They're in small commercial areas, not next to residential. Up in Green Meadows, there's the vet clinic. There's a doggy daycare next door. I don't see where they bother anybody. And there's also a daycare next to them, right in between them. And I guess on Green Meadows, you know.
Yeah,
Okay. And those I mean, they're not in residential areas. Then of course the big guys there in Columbus, that's MedVet. They're up there on Wilson Bridge, up there by the railroad
Worthington,
tracks,
yeah.
and that's Worthington. And again, in a very commercial business district, none of those are in residential areas, and nor should they be.
So is there like a residential versus commercial kennel then? Is that?
Too much traffic, too much car traffic for all these businesses too.
Well, and the township does have the ability to regulate you can prohibit agriculture on any lot under 1 acre. So that would prevent a situation of somebody having an in-house kennel, but I think that goes back to Christine's comment of we maybe want to permit kennels in districts with vets or permit that type of thing. So I think we'll probably have to look at just all of the cross sections just to make sure that ag kennels and then because I think you do have ag as permitted use in every district.
Okay.
Good question.
Yes, thank you.
All right. That was it I had for this page. Does anybody else on the commission? Can we move on to the next then? Let's keep going.
Again, I think we heard some feedback, we need to look at our definitions for the various types of overnight lodging. So that's something we are currently working on.
And one thing that Robin and I, just so the commission is aware, one thing we've talked about and made revisions to, I don't know if it was the apartment industry, lobbying industry, but in the last few years or so, a definition was included into that basically it's called a residential hotel. And a residential hotel is basically it's an apartment complex, but it is just couched as something that.
So is it for short-term leasing versus long-term leasing?
It's 30 days and more. And it's a statutory definition, and if you don't specifically regulate it, it is considered a hotel. And so it's a way for apartment complexes to come in under the guise of it's a hotel. And so Robin and I have updated the obviously there's, working through with clarifying the various definitions, but that is something that's been carved out to make sure that one of these residential hotels is not going to come in under the guise of one of your hotel definitions.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not reflected in this draft yet, but it will be reflected in the next version.
So, do you have a definition of personal services?
We should.
Same question.
Okay, so, because I don't know if it's like, an accountant or like a professional consultant,
So,
or
yeah,
if it's
so-
like hair and nails.
Yeah, generally the hair and nails, so full definition, it's on page 43 of the PDF, which is not helpful for those of you who are using hard copies. But it's an establishment that provides non-medical services, including but not limited to beauty salons, barbershops, and tanning salons by licensed professionals. Such an establishment may also include accessory retail sales of products related to services provided.
Okay, so,
And allowed in conditional use for neighborhood.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's another thing. I don't know if we've touched on that just yet, but I think the things that I noticed is, we're having a lot more conditional uses than we've ever done before, which we advocate for as far as, having the ability to go through a special use type of permitting, but still have the public input and have a hearing with it. So that is going to be new with the BZA, as they will see probably more conditional uses than they've ever seen before. And then the other thing too is that the zoning team and I have been open to allowing lighter commercial uses in residential zones that are not allowed at all. So, having like a coffee shop in the middle of a residential is something that the commission would be interested in partaking. So that's kind of the lens that we took with these conditional uses. So if should there be a small hair salon in a residential neighborhood, if it can be. So that is very new in this code, but just again something to keep in mind. But when you see those conditional uses in the residential zones, the intent is to have lighter commercial uses to be allowed. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think that's a good thing.
yeah, I mean, I think it creates some diversity in the neighborhood and
Walkability as well.
yeah, the walkability part.
And I already know people have it as like a home use or home occupation anyway, of where they might invite people over and cut their hair.
Sure. Or operate a small beauty salon out of the basement of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in terms of research laboratory facility, is there a square footage limit? I gotta go back and check my definitions, but.
There's not.
All right.
Each of the districts would have. Are we regulating lot coverage?
Yes.
Okay, so in theory, that should be helping with, having a ginormous box of something. I mean, there's still going to be setbacks, lot coverage, landscaping, all that. So
Okay.
I don't know, having a square footage limit for all uses is going to be doable, but
Is there a reason why we would have a conditional use in a residential area that we would not have in farm residential?
I think it depends on the case. Again, I think the idea of having those kind of small scale uses in a neighborhood context is kind of that walkability that somebody is kind of designed for the area immediately around it. With farm residential properties, you're talking about just bigger properties, people are probably going to be driving to it more. At that point, maybe a rezone to a commercial zone is the right avenue rather than a conditional use in a residential zone. But it would depend on the case.
Okay. Assuming that there's a farmhouse there, and somebody wants to cut hair, why wouldn't we let them do that?
Yeah, I think the personal services is probably a good fit for that.
yeah, is the board interested in doing conditional uses for personal services?
I think that's the only way you could, because you'd have to know that it was more walk-in, more than drivable traffic with respect to a neighborhood. So yeah, that always all has to be conditional.
But are we, in general, are we in support?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think it's a good idea leaving it open, but yes.
And Christine, going back to your comment on the research facility, is there?
It's just because, like, when I think of research or laboratory facility, I think of, I'm not worried about like LabCorp where you draw your blood. I'm more worried about if it's like a mini pilot plan, or if it's more like an industrial lab or research facility, which I have no problems in the commercial. I have no problems in the industrial. In the mixed use, I might not want that next to housing.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd rather have that conditional there, if that makes sense.
Conditional in a mixed use.
Yeah.
We could, that is one that we could maybe take out of mixed use. I don't think that's.
Like I said, I don't have a problem with it. It's just like a scale issue of, if it's something,
Yeah.
simple versus, I'm mixing, industrial processes, or I'm doing a mini pilot plan or something like that.
Animal testing.
What was that?
Animal testing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But should be conditional, because if there's a blood donation facility or something, it should be allowed in mixed use.
Exactly, yeah. So that's why I said I don't have a problem with a small scale one, but more concerned about large scale.
Anything else on this page?
I have nothing. I know we talked about definitions, so that was there. It looks like on the next page is where we hit gas stations.
Yes.
Do we have, I'm trying to figure out how to put it. Lewis Center Village, I like to have them keep what they have there now. I really don't want to see like a Sheetz open up in Lewis Center Village.
Yeah, that is one I think that's been pointed out to me before. I think that's a good candidate to remove from.
Yeah.
Or just make conditional so that if you're there right now, like, you know, I know there's like a custard place and a few other little places there,
Yeah,
which I think are great,
Mm-hmm.
and the convenience store there, if it was walkable, would be great.
Well,
But
I think that standalone convenience store would fall under retail and not necessarily.
But wouldn't that Lewis Center overlay take care of that?
Well,
Wouldn't
so this is-
wouldn't that also, you couldn't have a sheets because the Lewis Center overlay wouldn't allow them the space and land use that they wanted. So it would seem that if you stuck to that, it would take care of anything
Yeah.
large coming in.
unless they bought several lots and consolidated.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Dennis, the development standards function, we wouldn't allow them to, but I think we
Yeah.
could just make it explicit and remove that from the
Yeah.
use table entirely.
But yeah, if you held to the development standards, they wouldn't be interested.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like one could make it work if we see that it's permitted. So I'd rather just take it out entirely.
Yeah, take it out, yeah.
Like I said, or make it conditional use and
right.
have it reviewed. But just by, like I said, I don't want to see sheets and.
But yeah, and the intent with the Lewis Center Village District overlay is kind of to keep, because it is actually one of the only mixed-use original districts that we have. So having those light uses, and also having an opportunity for people to come in and build and not ask for 100 variances is the
nice,
goal. Yeah.
And protect against a situation where someone has large piece of acreage rezones to
Yeah.
this district and just increases density,
Yeah.
so.
Right. Yeah, it's only subject to the existing village.
Yeah, so if somebody came in and bought half of Lewis Center and wanted to put something major there, wouldn't that have to go through approval for BZA or for zoning at some
Well,
point?
they're gonna have to, how it's written, they would have to apply for, it's kind of how we did the Route 23 overlay district, so they would have to apply, and go through, some type of board approval process.
Right.
Right now, we're proposing it to, be, have the zoning commission kind of be the authoritative board to take that action on that. Whereas the overlay was ultimately the trustee's decision, so.
Because I can see that come up just because sitting across the
Yeah.
street from Evans Farm, that is going to show up at some point,
Yeah, is that the one?
just because of their geography.
Well, I guess it's good to look and see what we would be willing to have there.
Yeah, so I think that requires further
Yeah,
investigation.
Yeah.
And thought.
I'm sure a car wash or a gas station would apply like 10 times. Right, so. Anyways, my question was retail store under small, under 4,000. GFA is again,
Gross floor area.
close for it. Yeah. So that versus the personal services thing. So if we allow that conditionally in neighborhood, should we allow this in conditionally in neighborhood?
I tend to agree. Is the rest of the commission?
what would be the change? Sorry.
So for small retail under 4,000 gross floor area.
Oh,
to be
for
conditionally
neighborhood
permitted in
FR1.
neighborhood FR1.
Yeah,
It's again walkability for
makes sense.
I mean, I would love to have more mom and pop convenience stores show up rather than big box retail.
So short-term rentals, we are able to regulate.
So we're working through this.
Okay,
now.
just the legislation is depending on the day, I feel like, so.
So, what Rob and I have talked about is short-term, and you guys are not alone in wanting to restrict short-term rentals. It is, probably ripe for a lawsuit, to be honest, of the ability to restrict. Because at the end of the day, how do you and what we had talked about, specifically was, how do you differentiate between something that is it's still a residential use. You know, it's still a house or it's an apartment. I mean, that's the biggest concern of it's a single family subdivision and they've got a party house or just a house that's on Airbnb and it's rented. You know, at the end of the day, from a use perspective, it's still underlying residential, even though there is a small commercial component. But the township doesn't regulate houses that are rented for longer term.
Well, that was actually one of my questions of corporate entities buying single-family homes and then leasing them out, as opposed for potentially short-term rentals, as opposed to a homeowner being able to buy it. And how does that fit in with the short-term rental?
And I think so. Again, the argument does the commercial component somehow change it so it's no longer a residential use? Because at the end of the day, it's still a residential district, and so even though it's being rented for short term, it's being rented by a commercial entity or that type of thing. It is very difficult to thread the needle, and I don't know that it's possible to thread the needle. One thing that we have talked about, and I think possible real differentiation is you're starting to hear more about kind of these party houses or that sort of thing, where it's, well, no one's actually sleeping here. This is more of an event space than anything else. That people rent in order to, again, throw a party, but nobody's actually staying the night over. You know, I think that might be the possibility of a lawsuit that, yeah, it is in violation of, the zoning district and that sort of thing. But again, if there's always a first, and certainly if the township were to, we're not aware of anyone actually restricting short-term rentals, but something everybody's asking about, and it's hard to believe, but it's still a pretty recent phenomenon. I'm trying to think of when I first heard about Airbnb, and it's maybe been around for not that long. But
they formed in California in 2008, as I recently learned at a Lincoln convention.
Okay, so Papa does.
How many days is the short term? Is considered short term?
Under 30 days.
Under 30.
And so one thing that is a little tricky with us being a township is that cities have more powers than we do, kind of outside of zoning, to regulate these things, where they can create registries and impose bed taxes and things like that for short-term rentals. Really, our only option as a township, unless I'm way off base, is to restrict it through zoning, which is kind of murky territory.
I think there is a recent lawsuit with the Airbnbs and the VRBOs right now because of the affordable housing issue. There's a big lawsuit right now.
And I know through Planning Association that communities have tried to regulate it, but again, I think it's because they're cities and they're trying to make sure that residents have affordable housing and it's not all used up by people coming for short-term vacations. Exactly.
And so I'll preface this by saying this is not a huge issue for us. We have some Airbnbs that are listed here certainly. We have one in Evans Farm that's listed as a coastal Columbus getaway, which is very awesome. They do exist.
And there's one down the street from where I live that some of the neighbors have complained about.
So really in my time at the zoning office here, I've never really received a complaint for short-term rentals here. Again, it's not a huge issue. We're not right next to the Kings Island or some big tourist attraction that really can cluster those. So I guess my question to the commission is, do you think this is something we should try to regulate, knowing that there is potentially some risk in doing it through zoning? Also, it's logistically difficult to enforce.
The one in my neighborhood, the only issue is when it becomes a party house. I'll be honest. I don't think anybody cares as long as it's quiet and maintained. But I do believe some of the neighbors have talked about that some of the guests were using it as a party house.
I think something to, which obviously that conduct is incredibly frustrating. And there are other governmental avenues for addressing it, again, with calling the cops.
Yeah,
Or you're,
well,
or
that's
they,
pretty much, I think, what neighbors have done.
or if you're in an HOA, the HOA is still to have, this is nuisance behavior. Certainly if someone were to, if they were to trash the place, and it just became, just a rundown property, then the township might have some other options in terms of enforcement. But just right now on the zoning landscape, it is, it's uncharted territory.
So in this draft, I have it as a conditionally permitted use in residential zone. Is that something that we think should have to go before the BZA? Should we just not try to regulate it at all? What are your thoughts on this?
I don't think we should regulate it, given one, it is uncharted territory. Second, most importantly, it's not an issue for us.
Yeah, and if there is legislation that we actually can take on and enforce, that, again, this isn't forever. We can always add that in the future. But yeah, I mean, adding something that is murky territory is the words we're using. It is a risk for us to add.
I was gonna say, in this case, I defer to legal of what we can and can't do. And if we can't regulate it,
Yeah.
we should probably stay out of it just to protect the township. As much as, I know some of my neighbors would like to regulate the party house down the street.
And they may, if somebody looks at the zoning,
residential, I believe.
if someone looks at this, they may think we can do a lot more than we actually can. So that's not a good look either, so.
And I assure you, the second that we become aware or blame, we will.
We'll be on it.
Staff and everyone will be on it, but just as of right now, you might be able to, but it is just such a gray area and murky waters.
And there are many other ways of doing it, HOAs and all other things. So.
Is there any legal way to differentiate between whether a property is owned by an individual versus a non-individual corporate, whatever?
Yeah. Because for the purposes of zoning, the regulation is the use of the property itself, and zoning doesn't take into account how the property is owned. And taking it a step farther, because I know that more often than not, if a property is held by an entity of some sort, it may be a rental, it may be a commercial property, but what I can also say is that sometimes folks have their own, unique estate planning or unique reasons and private reasons for having property in an LLC or an entity name that might still be owner occupied, but yeah, for purposes of zoning, that's not something that can be regulated.
Okay, so I will remove short-term rental from the use table. Thank you for that.
So I do have a question about standalone drive-through facility, and whether or not it should be a conditional use in mixed use. Because in my mind, a mixed use district is supposed to be walkable. And if you have a bunch of standalone drive-throughs, it's not promoting walkable community.
Makes sense.
So not that I want to discount it, but I would rather see it regulated to only have a certain number allowed or whatever, because then you're turning your mixed use center into a commercial corridor. That's just, I don't know how other people in the commission feel, but okay. And then the only other question I had was the vehicle repair garage, heavy vehicles. Are we allowed to not have them, or do we have to have it as a conditional use in our industrial district?
I'm gonna check the definition first.
Okay. Because I'm assuming heavy vehicle repair is like truck repair or tractor repair or something.
I feel like we have to find a way for it.
What was that?
I feel like we have to find some
Well, that's
avenue
what I-
for any use.
That's what I was saying, is maybe make it conditional under flex employment
Yeah.
zone, which is our industrial zone, and have it conditional there. So basically, I highlighted stuff that was like not allowed at all, because I was concerned about the legality of it.
Me too.
Which is why we have legal counsel to keep us straight.
The heavy vehicle cutoff is 7,000 pounds, so trucks, tractors.
Mhm.
How much does like an F-150
Yeah.
weigh? Bigger.
I don't know. I would just say, I assumed it was like, semi-trucks, tractors,
Right.
combine harvesters, whatever, which would make sense under the flex employment zone and,
5,800 pounds.
Oh.
Up to.
F-350 is 8,134.
oh,
So, yeah, I think that is probably thank you for if we can have that as conditional in the flex employment, I think we can tweak that definition.
Okay.
So, because that's another,
Are there restrictions for that mixed use?
it's not permitted mixed use.
Well, not for the trucks, but just back to that a minute. Are there restrictions as to what kind of businesses and things can be? And
Yeah,
Mixed
so that
use.
would be,
okay,
yeah. This row here.
Perhaps more than 10,000 pounds,
Yeah,
more than,
yeah.
or more than 2 axles.
how many wheels, etc. So and I'm assuming like RVs or whatever would fall under that as well. So I would feel just if we had it conditional and flex, we could look at it.
Makes sense.
Mostly because there's a lot of RVs that are being sold in the area with Allen Creek that would potentially need servicing.
Mm-hmm. All right, anything else on this page?
I'm curious about vehicle sales and service. Why we're treating commercial versus flex employment? Why wouldn't it be conditional for both?
So again, the flex employment is more of an industrial zone. It would be more, it's generally heavy uses.
And I assume when you mean vehicle sales and service, you mean like auto dealerships,
Mm-hmm.
which we have certain areas of 23 have been heavily developed by auto dealerships, and I would rather see another form of growth along 23.
Are those in the township?
Some,
Okay.
some with this.
Is there anything that can be done about the density of certain types of businesses in terms of proximity to each other? So that you can't have 6 contiguous used car lots.
I don't think we can do that. Because we've had people complain about, I don't want McDonald's, I want something different. And I was like, a commercial use is a commercial use. According to our zoning code, we can't restrict who wants to move and develop a property in terms of who they are, McDonald's versus Wendy's versus Panera.
Well, they're not by brand,
But it's,
but by type of business.
No.
Just no way to do that.
yeah.
The invisible hand of the market.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm not talking about brand, I'm talking about how people don't want fast food
Yeah.
versus another.
But yeah, I mean, if you
another form of-
allow a gas station in a district and every parcel is zoned that district, then in theory, every parcel can be a gas station.
yes, we'd have a room full of people complaining, yes, but there'd be very little, you could
Yeah.
be tough to reject it.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, the gas stations and car washes, a lot of people.
I mean, if I was a car wash, I wouldn't want to build right next to a car wash, but I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah, they do their
But they-
own
they can,
marketing
yeah.
decisions based on things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like Dennis said, we've had rooms full of people complain, well, yes, I want commercial use, I just don't want fast food. And we're like, we have no control over that.
Yeah.
Welcome to America. we're market driven.
I would like to say, if you want absolute control over the property, then you need to buy
You
it.
need to own it, that's right.
Exactly.
You need to own it.
And not everything can be a park. All right, we move on to the next page.
Sure.
So I'll point out, central communications facility, we are working on adding some additional language for that.
That's what I was about ready to look up, the definition of that, because I mean, is that like a cell tower
Yes.
versus like a Verizon store?
I think a Verizon store would be a little bit.
I would like to think it's a cell tower and not a Verizon store, but that's what I'm getting at. Other people might think a Verizon store or a Apple store is essential.
So, and we are looking at adding language for this, so it's a little bit similar to agriculture, that the state has very specific, well, even at the federal level, there's very specific guidelines about what we can and can't regulate, and how we can regulate it. So we are looking at adding that language to kind of regulate what we can.
Is that what it's called? Essential communications facility, or did we just like?
That was a zone code definition.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was like we use like utility or I don't know, something that like pops out a little more when we see.
We may want to consider changing the defined term to like telecommunications.
Yeah.
Basically the statutory term
Okay,
for it.
yeah, because that can be. I mean, I know we'll have a definition, but I wouldn't even know to look for that if I was. I don't know.
Looking for a cell tower?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we don't have them anymore, those little like radar installation or something. So what's the definition of an art center versus a community center, and why is it community centers have greater uses than art centers?
Like our pool would be a community center, you know?
Yeah, so what do you consider? Because I consider like an art center, like, I don't know, somewhere like that might have like a pottery studio and a paint studio or something like that. So, in my mind, where you have a community center, you should have an art center as well, because it's actually a less intensive use than a community center.
I mean, is it just like maybe is it public versus private centers? I don't know.
What do you think of the community center in Westerville or
Yeah.
Worthington? And they have various activities that go on there.
Yeah.
An art center, I see more as like a little studio, like across from the Worthington Library, the one on Park.
That was my question. The previously permitted art studio, what's the difference between art center and art studio?
So an art studio is workspace which is not necessarily open to the public. An art center is a non-profit, public or commercial facility for preserving and exhibiting artistic, historical, scientific, natural, or man-made objects of interest, which may include the sale of objects collected in really the sale of crafts, work boutiques, and holding public and private meetings and social events.
So my just thought was that where you have community centers allowed, you should have art centers allowed, and if you have concerns, just have them as conditional use. So like I could see like an art center. You can have a community center in a neighborhood zone. Why can't you have an art center? Why can't you have like a pottery studio or a paint studio?
So same for arts and community center.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe for a time, there was a place called the Garden State Arts Center, which was in New Jersey, and more resembled the Boston Music Center than what you're talking about as an art center. So I think maybe there might need to be some sort of square footage.
Yeah, well, in that case, I'm thinking of an art center as like Worthington Art Center, or there's like one up in Delaware where you go.
The castle.
The castle, exactly, where you go and you do stuff, not a performing arts center, which would be like the Met or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but I think of an art center as like, sometimes, like you said, the castle, it's an old house, they've turned it into spaces, or old schools. There's one, God, where is it? It's an old school that was, part of it's been turned into like an art center where you have like pottery space and things like that.
But by
It's in Columbus.
But by the definition that Robin read, it is basically a museum. Right? Yeah. My question is on event center. So if you look at Little Bear Loop, they have this golf, typically with golf courses, the centers. It's called a community center, but it is also an event center where marriages happen, things happen. So shouldn't that be a neighborhood zone conditional use?
So I'm not sure if that's like
That's
see, I thought that was more like a private.
That's private for Little Bear.
Well,
No,
But
because it used to be,
we
because
allow-
somebody else bought it.
We allowed to
Somebody
make it
just
public,
bought
but originally it was like a private.
It was private to
little-
Little Bear.
Yeah,
Now
but,
there's
I mean, I have
investors who bought it.
yeah, I was gonna say, I know somebody that just got married there, they don't
Right,
live
and
there,
investors
so.
bought it.
Exactly.
Um,
It's an event center. Right?
It's a tricky one because, I mean, again, I think.
The zoning is very unique, that
yeah,
plan
so I think
district.
in that-
So
Yeah.
the issue I have with like event centers and like neighborhood zones for community zones is depending upon the scale of event center, you have parking issues. Like there, because it was like originally a clubhouse, they have parking provided. But if I take like,
Yeah.
you know, an old farmhouse in Lewis Center and decide to turn it into a wedding venue or, you know,
Yeah, I
an older
mean-
house, then I have to look at parking.
Every new neighborhood that is being constructed has a clubhouse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Potentially in the future, that clubhouse could ultimately be just like anywhere.
Like an event center.
It could become an event center. So that's why, do we want to clarify? the
I guess,
size
like,
of the park?
well, that could fall into like a mixed-use district, right? Yeah. If there was another Little Bear product, because there wasn't, we don't have any mixed use until this. So,
Or would Little Bear be considered mixed use then?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if we got an application like that today, somebody like Little Bear was like, hey, I want single-family housing, but I want an event center and a golf course and this, we may consider them falling into like a mixed-use district now.
Or they can do a PUD.
Or a PUD, yeah,
PUD
yeah.
With like a golf course
Yeah.
community or something like that.
And that's always an option, for any of this, so.
And which is more common in the newer single family communities growing if you look now.
But yeah, I think if you permitted it in a neighborhood zone, that could, well, I don't know, I guess they're all planned districts now, but if a single family district comes in, just a single family and has like a clubhouse as is, and then later on they want to make an event center out of it, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Little Bear is kind of a unique situation because of the golf course and residential, and the event center was relatively large. It wasn't a standard little
Exactly.
clubhouse for what we get used to. So I consider that already a unique. It was one of the first things of its kind in Orange Township. 'Cause that was a long time ago. That was
Yeah.
pretty early in the process.
I live in that community, so I know.
Yeah. There isn't anything else like it.
Yeah, I've been to events there.
I can't see anybody else turning their little clubhouse into what Little Bear has for their.
Because
events.
private clubhouses that
Yeah,
is a very small, you may have a couple workout things.
Yeah.
It's a small room.
It's the size,
I
yeah.
know, but to maintain that growth, because there was no other way. Otherwise, they had to increase the HOAs on everybody.
No, I agree with
That
that.
is-
I'm saying that a private residential up at not Glen Ross, but any of them, their little clubhouses or residential clubhouses are very small. You have a couple workout little gyms in there. You have a space with a small kitchenette, and that's it. And it wouldn't really be the same.
No.
So what's your definition of a commercial college? mean, is it like a for-profit or, or is that what you're considering like a not?
For-profit post-secondary education.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll be getting a lot of those. but-
Okay, I was just thinking as opposed to like, you know, I know Columbus State is sort of outside there, but it's down the road, or Dock is down the road, the Delaware area.
Mhm.
Because you have on the next page, school, college, university. Does the commission, does the township need a separate for-profit versus private? I'm thinking, I mean, what, is Honkers a for-profit? I'm trying to think of like, what are some I feel like maybe some of the technical schools.
I'm like DeVry was for profit when there was a DeVry. You could say there are some sort of other like tech training that's considered a for-profit college.
I guess it doesn't matter.
I don't think
as
the
far as-
for-profit matters one way or the other.
Actually, it matters to me.
Yeah, but I don't think that matters.
Like, it matters
to
as far as
itself.
the use goes, or?
Because I consider for-profit more of a commercial use versus an institutional use,
Well,
if that makes sense.
if, let's say, Tech Elevator or someone decides to have a tech boot camp thing for like a 6-month boot camp, is that considered under this? So they want a space. Of course, you can put it on the PUD. Like, I'm trying to understand. Would a tech elevator do that?
I don't know.
I mean, we
How
can
do we permit that?
we can keep it in. You know, the likelihood of getting one is going to be slim, but
But those could literally be any kind of size. So it doesn't have to be giant to be
Yeah.
considered in that kind of facility.
It can be any size.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it gets to be tough to say, oh, you know, for profit matters. It's like, well, if it can be any size, then it's a matter of a structure, and you're trying to zone it based on what it is and where it is. And to me, I wouldn't really care whether it's non-profit or for-profit, because I'm assuming it's likely going to be small.
It doesn't have to be.
And would they be-
I'm fine with the restrictions it has right now,
Yeah, I mean,
compared to like the schools.
Yeah, Christine's point, the table as it's set up now does look at it as kind of more of a commercial use that should go in a commercial zoning district, whereas the school, college, university is basically permitted everywhere.
Mhm. Since we're on the next page with schools, I did have a question about the drug, alcohol, or psychiatric treatment center, and whether or not we're allowed to exclude them, or whether or not we should need to make them conditional under like flex employment, industrial.
I suppose, so I do think that you need at least a conditional use somewhere. I don't know if industrial. is
Or
necessarily
institutional,
the
or
best, perhaps institutional. What's the definition? What's the term? Drug, alcohol.
I'd say commercial or flex.
Where do we put our hospitals and clinics?
Facility that provides treatment or counseling for persons having drug or alcohol use problems or psychiatric illnesses under the supervision of professional health care or social service providers.
so is it,
It would be institutional, wouldn't it, because it's sort of like a hospital with the treatment facility?
What are the two hospitals we have? Where are those listed?
Yeah.
Those are both in plain commercial.
Plan commercial?
Are we keeping campus institutional?
That is a question that I have yet to pose, but
Okay.
it is a question.
Yeah, we don't have to get into too much right now, but you know, when we started looking at the uses, it seemed like campus institutional almost fell into either flex or commercial a lot. So we were like, well, do we want to add this extra zone? Like, what's the incentives for somebody to apply for that zone if they can fall into the others?
Yeah.
So just this something to think about. But to your drug, alcohol, and psychiatric treatment center needs to fall in somewhere.
Okay. So in my mind, it would go under institutional or.
Or.
I was like, I don't really consider it commercial, although I know,
Yeah, I'll look at our zoning map. I tend to think that flex employment would probably be the better option.
I mean, or maybe make them conditional in both.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then-
we have one in a commercial district right now.
Well, I think that's also because we didn't really have an institutional.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't.
Or it just says any and all type commercial establishments.
Exactly. Anything goes here.
Yeah.
I would probably recommend putting it as conditional and flex employment. Not commercial.
Rob, with one additional definition comment, we were looking at schools. Shoot. So for primaries, for school comma primary and school comma secondary, it talks about a school that's operated by a public or religious institution. Do you think that needs to be cleaned up? Because there could be a private school that's not affiliated with a religious institution. Just a minor comment.
Well, I don't think whether or not it would either be public or private, and religion shouldn't be an issue. It would just be considered one of the private type school facilities.
Thank you for that. All right, we've got 2 more pages. Now we're through.
Yes.
So everybody good with this page?
Object care, I just wonder, right? On the object care, should it have the same as clinics? In terms of conditional use for community living? Neighborhood.
I'm gonna say probably not.
Object care.
Very commercialized.
So what's the definition of urgent care versus clinic? Versus like,
Because that could be like a 24-hour thing, right?
an urgent care? Yeah,
I'm just saying. So
they can be.
Yeah.
And a clinic, I assume, but is it, when you think of a clinic, is it just like a standalone clinic?
Yeah,
Like a
I just
doctor's
think,
office,
like-
Or is it like a CVS that has like the little minute clinic where I
don't
get
see
my
that.
shots?
Yeah, I don't see it as a CVS clinic.
So clinic, any establishment where human patients are examined and are treated by or under the care or supervision of doctors, dentists, or other medical practitioners, but where patients are not hospitalized overnight. Urgent care. A medical facility other than a hospital or clinic, where medical, mental health, and other personal health services are provided on an outpatient basis from on-site staff on an as-needed basis. Such clinics differ from medical or dental offices in that doctors do not treat patients on a long-term repeat basis, but instead treat short-term illnesses or medical issues. I think there maybe is some cleaning up of the definitions.
Yeah, because in my mind, urgent care could be 24 hours, which
and
means
I don't think you want that next to your house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas, yes.
That was my I think that's fair.
You know, and same thing with standalone emergency facility. That is even like one up from urgent care of ambulances will be going there at night with
Oh, emergency.
You okay there, Dennis?
No, yeah, but to me, these days, that depends on its size.
Yeah.
You are two hospitals, you're not gonna get that kind of traffic. Anything happens, they're sending you to Riverside or somebody
Right.
else. They're, you know, they may take some walk-in patients, but they're gonna get you out of there as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Both of them are more like,
stay in
yeah,
emergency longer because it's really constantly more.
yeah.
Anyway,
One additional thought, as far as collapsing a standalone emergency facility with hospital first service, full service with emergency, just to combine those into the same term or definition. Don't know if there's and the only difference is additional use in mixed use district. Just a thought.
Anything else in this? Oh, well, I think are we here now? Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
The park, yes.
Parks are permitted everywhere, just
Yay, parks.
You can buy the land and make a park anyway.
I'm assuming the commercial recreation is defined by some type of acreage or area in each of the definitions.
Okay, so community living zone is basically our multi-family
Mm-hmm.
zone.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about having parking garages as a conditional use there. Really,
yeah.
depending upon the scale of the development and what it's neighboring. For example, like our friends that we saw last week who were complaining about our 4-story and the big parking lot across the street from them, if they had a public parking garage across the street from them, they would have had a conniption fit. So that maybe something like that, in terms of how it impacts residential communities, might be best reviewed on a conditional use.
Sure.
Yeah, I can't think of any area in Orange Township you could build one of those.
But if it's
without a room
private,
full of people.
if it's private, so if it's like gated for the residents, that's,
Yeah.
is that allowed?
Well, and so we'll have to look at our definitions
Okay.
of this again, because the definitions as they currently stand separate them out by size. So if
Okay.
it was more than 5 vehicles, then it was considered public.
Okay.
But I think we'll have to look at that to clarify, you know, if it's an accessory use for.
So right now, when I think of public parking garage, I think of, you know, something that like you might have like at a hospital
Yeah.
complex or a large apartment complex or something like that, or a large business complex, which I would want to regulate if it was in a neighborhood district.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how to, you know, y'all can figure this out and how to make sense of it in terms of these tables and definitions.
I saw one, I was in Hawaii, in Honolulu, had a Home Depot. Because the land's so expensive and so limited, this Home Depot had a 3-story parking garage. Because just the space, didn't have the space for the parking in the lot, but.
And parking garages are just so expensive, and so the fact that like this is the most cost-effective option.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that like in Arlington, Virginia, where
Yeah, if the space, exactly, if the land is so expensive and the space is limited, yeah,
or like, you know, public parking garages or, you know, Short North has their fair share of parking down.
10 years from now.
another 20 or 30 years, I think with that kind of thing's absolutely a possibility.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
just not today.
yeah.
We'll look at
Okay, so just think about that.
Is utility generation facility the same as essential communications facility?
No, but it may overlap with our definition.
So I thought that was like a electric substation.
Okay.
So
Or
I didn't know-
potentially
I didn't know if there was a
solar or
tower.
wind facility.
Or water,
Yeah.
water plant.
So it's interesting, it does mention solar in the definition, but it does not mention wind. So I think, if anything, we'll have to swap those out, but we'll look at that.
But generally, can we regulate? So I thought we don't regulate quote unquote public facilities. So we wouldn't regulate like an AEP substation or a water facility or a sewer facility or anything like that,
I
correct?
mean, practically we don't. I'm unsure as to the legalities of how much we can.
We will check with legal on that one.
That's why she's here. Thank you.
I mean, the big AEP power facility, or not power facility, but substation in the township is zoned FR1. We have been very hands-off in the past.
It's FR1.
See,
It's
here
surrounded by industrial.
I thought it was in the industrial zone.
It's surrounded by industrial. Those properties themselves FR1.
Okay. So yeah, I would like look into the definition and then we can get a better idea of what is, allowed versus conditional in various areas.
Anything else on this page?
Are we good with allowing accessory dwelling units? Because that's a new thing.
So I have no problem with accessory dwelling units. I know in most neighborhood areas, they're going to be limited by the HOA anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if it's allowed, it's a really great housing tool, but we don't allow that right now.
They don't remember the Evans Farm.
In Evans Farm, yes, Evans Farm is first.
So the question is, it looks like they're allowed in the neighborhood, in the farm,
So they're conditional.
conditional, I'm not sure why they're conditional in the campus institutional zone, but not allowed like in the mixed use or community zone as conditional. What the logic behind that was.
I guess if you were to have an apartment complex, maybe that's the thought process. How would you?
I don't have a good answer for why it's included in the campus institution.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of avoided that question, so I don't know either. But yeah, I mean, if it's an apartment complex or any type of multifamily development, to have
It's
an ADU,
already allowed.
yeah, it's kind of already there. So it's really designed for if there's going to be a single-family home or an individual lot, can they have an additional dwelling in their backyard?
So the other question is, are live-work units allowed?
I think that would be mixed use.
Okay.
I think at
That
that
you would
point,
just put that under mixed use, as opposed to have a live-work in a commercial district or live-work as conditional in a residential district. Okay. I'm just checking, because we're not there yet. We don't have the density that like Columbus has, where you would have live-work in some
there's
neighborhoods.
some at Evans Farm.
Yeah.
So maybe it should be a conditional use in the mixed use if there was like a mini Evans Farm that came. I don't know. Does mixed use have to be mixed use buildings? I can't remember.
No.
Okay, so it could be like a single family next to a commercial hub. So we could allow the single family to have ADUs. Just something to think about.
Conditionally, it should be in the mixed use.
Maybe. I don't have strong feelings.
Okay. I mean, I'm just curious. I like the idea of live-work units, just because I guess for me it like makes sense. It goes back to sort of the traditional. I have an office downstairs, and I live out back or upstairs or something like that. You know, and I think after COVID, like big office space is not what it used to be after COVID. And I could see more live work or more, like, I don't call it co-housing, but co-work spaces.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's some new ones coming online in Evansville.
Okay.
Some small shops that are, it's good to see.
Mhm. So,
Anything else on this one?
all right, let's move on.
Last page.
Last page. Yay! So again, I had the same question, assisted
Bless you.
living facility. Where we would put them? Would it be campus institutional? Would it be flex?
Yeah, we'll have to, Julie and I can look at this, so I think we might have to tweak the definitions as well, so that there's assisted living facility and then the senior assisted living facility, which is generally what we think of when we say assisted living.
Mhm.
I think the just assisted living, not the senior assisted living, there is certain state law that says what basically if they're under, if there's under 4 or 5 people, they're permitted in any multi-family district or any single family district, but if it's more than 5 people, but less than 12, they're permitted in multi-family. There's state law that regulates it, so we'll have to double check against that.
And that's different from like a group home where people are more independent but are living in a group home with supervision.
I think we need to
Oh.
define your home in addition to what Robin was saying, but also with the definition of group home and permanent supportive housing and skilled care facility. I think there are,
Whole spectrum.
yes, I think there are a few places where the Venn diagram, we just want to make sure the Venn diagram is not a circle.
And that everyone is accommodated for various levels of age and being independent. Or what permanent supportive housing might also be in that definition as well.
For the residential units, I mean, is it, I guess, can the density be regulated within the district itself as opposed to in the use table?
So, and this was one of regional planning's comments, and I will clarify this in the next revision. So when it's talking about this on the use table, that's the number of units in a specific building. So this is not density, this is the building type. Density is referenced in the development standards for each district, but one of regional planning's comments was that this is ambiguous, and I agree.
Okay.
We will clarify.
So it's units in a building, not units per acre.
Yeah. Thanks, I did forget about that comment.
Like a condo can have up to 5.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then with the senior care, skilled care, and transitional dwelling versus, I would sort of tie those definitions into like what we talked about in terms of group home and.
We'll go through those.
Yeah, because I assume when you mean senior independent living facility, it's more of like,
Those are the adults that are able to live independently, and then they have step up to assisted living.
Exactly.
And then you may go to memory care.
and that's what I'm thinking, as opposed to age restricted 55 or above community.
Right.
but I'm thinking of one where you're living independently in your condo or your apartment, but you're in a facility that has a range of care, whatever your level is at that point in your life.
Well, senior living facilities, from a medical perspective, they live like the, what is that place, they have on 36, I have one, I'm on 23 before the viaduct. Those are independent housing, and that is senior, but also senior living facilities can be the building itself that holds all those individuals that are able, they don't need a nursing care, they come and go, they do their thing, and
Yeah, they have like condos or apartments or whatever.
right, little
Within.
apartments, like at the Avalon down here behind Home Goods.
Mhm.
So we'll go through and clarify those.
Concession stand is not allowed in neighborhood.
Yeah, that's one we'll look at. That may even be a candidate for removing entirely from the use table.
Okay, but can we allow a concession stand in, or maybe have it conditional in farm residential?
I think that would, well, I guess.
This qualifies it as a temporary stand.
Okay.
Or accessory window at a sporting or other public venue or event that's food serves food and beverages.
Okay.
Like at school.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Because when I think of concession stand, I think of two things. I think of like, you know, a sports complex or like a football field where you're getting like your hot dog and your pop and your whatever. Or I'm thinking, you know, oh, I have a concession stand at the farm market where I'm gonna, you know, get my apple cider and my caramel corn or whatever.
Or my daughter's lemonade stand. During summer.
Yeah, that's not the.
It's okay. You can do it.
Honestly, I don't think we should look at during summer. I could see something going from like, you know, iced teas or soda to hot chocolate. Exactly. Or tea, or, you know, in Germany you had like mulled wine or something.
Oh, absolutely.
The Evans Farm, Dora.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I'm all for bringing mulled wine to this country. Makes the winters more enjoyable.
Speaking of events, I mean, I don't.
Temporary events is probably another candidate for removal from
Okay.
this use table.
Yeah, because I mean, to go through the conditional use process, just in like logistically, it could, the timing of those like
Yeah.
couldn't work, and we can have we have a block party or an event permit with the fire department and road. So if they are going to block there are some type of enforcement that we have as a township. So I don't think it's necessary to include in this.
Yeah, or if you have
Yeah.
like any sort of like a township movie in the park event or something like
Yeah.
that. It's, or Evans Farm, they have a lot of temporary events that they apply for permits for.
Yep.
I'm content to keep it that way.
Any other comments on the use table? Thank you for this marathon session. This has been a good discussion. We're not going to get through the rest of the districts and zones, but we'll continue on this next time. Thank you this is our 4th straight week of zoning commission hearings.
Wow.
Thank you all for your commitment.
Yes, thank you.
Giving me your all.
We get next week off, right?
We do get next week off. Yeah, just the small matter of the election.
I was gonna say, go vote.
Do we take that book home for?
Yeah, so we do have one on the 12th. Michelle, do you mind flipping to the last slide where you
Yeah.
set the dates up there?
Look at all the things you thought we were going to get through.
I have my slides here next time. So we're off next week. We do have a rezoning hearing, amendment for November 12th in 2 weeks. So there's hard copies of that amendment application on that table, so please grab one on the way out. I'll get you a staff report on that next week. So again, we have hearings scheduled for November 12th and December 3rd, and I'm expecting an application to be filed for the December 10th meeting as well. So that means we should continue this hearing depending on commission's willingness and availability to either November 19th or December 17th. Those are the only two open Tuesdays that are not on holiday weeks for the rest of the year.
I'd say November 19th instead of December 2nd.
Yeah.
That's fine.
All right, is everybody else good with continuing this zoning code update meeting to November 19th at 6:30? Can I have a motion?
I move motion.
Second.
Mr. McNulty?
Yes.
Mr. Bellis?
Yes.
Ms. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Pell?
Yes.
So you'll put that out and it'll show up on my Outlook.
I have not sent out a calendar.
Excellent. I love that.
So I'll get that out.
What would be
Yeah.
the goal for the 19th for us to review? The rest of 5 and 6? Is that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can get through at least Article 10, I mean, I think once we get into the districts and zones, the development standards, that discussion will go fairly quickly. So I think if we can get through at least Article 10 next time, that would be a good goal.
Okay, and you've already discussed about removing the tables from like the little individual sections
Correct, yeah.
and just having one
Yes.
comprehensive table,
Yeah.
so we don't have to like cross-reference this. Anything to make things easier. All right, is there any other business before the commission?
I'm sorry, so Article 10, what's, like, I guess, because we start the districts in Article 6, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to try to look at 4 districts at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's it, sorry.
No, if we can, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, well, if there's no other meeting before the commission, I hereby conclude this meeting. There, it's official.